steps. You can go to the next slide, ET. Right, so the mission of EnergySage specifically, as we mentioned briefly, it is essentially an online comparison marketplace. Our goal is not only to give you a variety of options so that you know that you're getting a good deal and you know that you're really comparing all of the options that are out there before you proceed, but also to help customers make a more educated and more empowered decision moving forward. You know, you understand the quotes that you're getting, you know how to read them, you know what you can expect. You're not just going into a deal of an installation without really having a good understanding of what you're going to get out of it. So again, help you get a good deal while also making sure that you know what you're getting and that you feel good about your decision moving forward. You can go to the next slide. So again, a little bit more about us. We are committed to transparency and choice. We like to think of ourselves as the trusted advisor. We do partner with every installer who works through our site, and I'll go a bit more in depth about our installer vetting process in a bit. But again, our goal is to help make comparison shopping as well as information easier to access. A lot of our initial funding came from the Department of Energy, as well as organizations like the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. So we do have a lot of federal and state level support and funding, as well as a consumer protection resource. And I do see a lot of questions coming in via the chat as well. That's great. We are going to have a section for a Q&A at the end of this as well. So you can definitely keep sending them in. But if we don't get to them at the end of that point, you can feel free to resend them. And if there are questions we don't get to during the presentation today, I am more than happy to take them offline, either over email or through a meeting with myself or one of the other members of my team. But you can go to the next slide. Beyond the comparison shopping resource, we have a wealth of content on the site, thousands of articles, videos, infographics, talking you through everything from the basics of what is residential solar, how do I do it, what are the basics and components of a system, all the way through detailed breakdowns of the cost benefits, average pricing for your state, a solar calculator to help you understand what size of a system you really need, and then a buyer's guide for both panels, inverters, and solar batteries. If you're looking to just get a general comparison of equipment types, how do different pieces compare from in terms of technical specs, efficiency, degradation. Again, just hoping to help you make the best decision possible and understand every aspect of the whole decision process from getting started all the way through your full installation. And you can go to the next slide here. So again, the experience here, I'm going to jump through some of these pretty quick. I know everyone here who has an EnergySage account is going to have seen a lot of this before. If you haven't, it's going to give you a bit of a breakdown. And if you haven't registered already, but are interested in solar, I absolutely recommend you just take the time to create a quick account with us, and it'll give you a good idea of what to really expect. But so at the phase you are when you register with EnergySage, you create a profile with us. We ask for a very small amount of information, your energy usage, your system and financing preferences, your roof location. Then installers will come in, essentially submit a quote to the site based on those specifics, and you'll have a variety to start comparing. You can go to the next slide here. Here is a quick snapshot of the base dashboard view that we call it, which is once you get quotes, the first view that you'll see. You see a quick snapshot of each individual quote, some specifics like the pricing information, the net investment, how much of your needs it's covering, some breakdowns of based on the quotes you have, which ones are the best value, most popular equipment, as well as options to actually look into the company that you're getting a quote from, some reviews about the company that you can click into, and options to schedule meetings with them directly when you're ready. You can go to the next page here. This page is where really my team spends the majority of our time during the advising sessions we do. This is what we call our side-by-side view or our comparison view, which is really where you can do a deeper apples-to-apples comparison between the bids. You can see each quote lined up and just compare based on pretty specific individual factors on really who is the best bid for you. You know, what are the differences on needs met, pricing, equipment options, everything like that. I know pages like this, especially for people who are new to solar, can be pretty overwhelming. That's really where we recommend if you're sort of what we'd call analysis paralysis, if you're stuck in a spot where you're really having trouble doing a comparison, feel free to loop around to us, and we are always more than happy to help do a comparison. And again, at the end of the presentation today, I'll talk through how you can get in touch with us and continue the conversation from here. Yep, so again, key roles of the energy advisors. Again, this is my team within the company. It's myself as well as 7 other members of our team. And this is what we do for a good portion of our day. So we are here as an objective third-party resource for customers using the site. We are ideally going to help you answer any questions you have about the process, talk through based on your preferences, what options might be best for you, do a comparison of the quotes that you've gotten, and really, again, help you get from point A to point C without needing to jump directly into those sales pitches that I know can get pretty cumbersome and overwhelming. And I do want to emphasize as well, I know this was a question a bit earlier in the chat regarding not wanting to get any sales calls from installers, not wanting them to be bombarding you with messages, emails, calls. We absolutely do not release your personal contact information until you request that we do. When you register with the site, you have an option to either list or omit your phone number. And if you do want to list a phone number, but you don't want installers getting in touch, you can list that you'd rather have no one calling you or just people from EnergySage until you're ready. And if you are comfortable with installers reaching out, you can indicate that as well and say once they're ready to have a chat, they can reach out to me and get that ball rolling. Beyond that, you can communicate with them entirely through the site if you'd prefer. We have a messages center where you can use that to communicate via just quick messages within the site, ask them any questions, have them send you information through the platform. And so again, no one will be getting in touch with you until you are ready for them to do so. All right, and finally, common questions. So I wanted to throw a set of questions on here that are just a basic overview of what we believe is a pretty common subset of hurdles that customers typically run into when they're looking to move forward. So hopefully we're going to run through these quickly, and hopefully they will answer a good number of the questions people were looking to have covered today. From there, again, we'll have a quick time for a Q&A. So roofing, this I would say comes up in a pretty good majority of the calls that we have, which is people wanting to get a better understanding of how their current roof factors in. Do I need a new roof? Is this something that's going to be considered when an installer is actually moving forward with me? Is it worth getting the roof redone before going solar? If my roof isn't that old, should I wait and just do solar the next time I replace it? And it's all fair questions. I would say that if you are concerned about the age of your roof, it's absolutely something that you can look into prior to doing this. Many installers are also licensed roofers, so when they come out and do an on-site survey with you during the process of moving forward, they can get up there with you and take a closer look at the roof, give you a ballpark of how much life the roof has left in it. If you need a new roof, you can absolutely work with them or an independent roofer to get the roof redone before going solar. I would also say, though, that going solar does tend to give your roof a couple extra years on its lifespan. By nature of giving it an extra layer of protection from the elements, I'd say a roof that has maybe 15 or 20 years left could easily get another 5 to 10, if not more, just by going solar itself. A common question as well is whether or not the roof can be bundled with the federal tax credit. This is a bit of a gray area from the IRS, and I would say that it is a question we get a lot. We can't necessarily give specific tax advice, not being financial advisors, but I would say the indication from the IRS is likely that it shouldn't count, given that it is not structurally part of the system itself. People have claimed it in the past, but again, I'd say it is a bit of a gray area from a financial perspective. So in terms of whether or not the roof should need to be replaced, the last point I would make is that it's worth kind of dividing it up into year lifespans. I'd say if your roof is less than 10 years old, it's likely going to be fine to be able to outlive the life of the system. 10 to 15 or 15 to 20, I'd say it can go either way, depending on how much wear and tear your roof sees. Over 20 years, I would probably recommend you just get it replaced. You can think of the roof replacement as more of a when than an if. If you're staying in the home, eventually it will need a replacement, and the earlier you can get it done, the earlier you can go solar and start saving money. The installers are offering different system sizes. Which one is right? This one is pretty common, especially for customers who have an abnormal roof structure or don't really have a perfect understanding of what your average utility usage actually looks like. So someone might come with a question and say, I have 3 quotes here. They're all different system sizes. They're all giving me different production. What am I really looking for here? And it can be difficult to compare. I would say that especially if you're at the initial system sizing phase, you can take the sizes a bit with a grain of salt. What one installer can realistically provide in terms of an adequate final system size, they all should be able to. Since they're working on the same roof, they're working with the same amount of physical space. And when you are proceeding with an installer, they will do a much deeper dive with you into your usage to really figure out what makes sense. And there are factors that we display on our quotes specifically that are sort of more size agnostic, helping you compare the price per unit that you're getting, which is typically going to remain relatively consistent as system sizes go up and down. And help you get an idea of, okay, even if I'm looking at 2 different system sizes, who's giving me the better rate? Who's giving me the better equipment? What installer is a better match for me? So there are other ways to compare initially. And I'd say if the initial quotes don't quite fit your expectations, again, have no worries about it. It can definitely be updated. Next one here, I don't have a full year's worth of utility bills. How do I size my system? And really, should I go solar if I don't have that? I would say that especially within the time that I've started working at EnergySage, the most common increased subset of users on the site has been new homeowners, people who are moving into a home that they have not lived in for very long and don't really have a good idea of how much they use, but they want to go solar. They want to start offsetting their carbon consumption. They want to start offsetting their utility bills, but don't really have a perfect idea of really how to size for that. I would say I typically recommend you get at least 3 months of usage in that new home so you have a baseline to work off of. And from there, installers will usually be able to work with you based on the couple months you have to sort of outline the projected usage over the course of a year based on factors like what is the heating and air conditioning within the home look like? So how is that going to affect seasonality? Do you have heat pumps? Do you have a hot tub? Details that based on the time of year are going to give you a reasonably simple way to track how your usage will grow and sort of dip over time. Obviously, there is an element of guesswork and estimation there. But in addition to that, especially if it's a home you plan on being in for a long time, you can plan for the usage you want to have rather than the usage you're currently using, which can sometimes come down to oversizing the system. If you go with a larger system, you have room to grow into it. Maybe you have an extra couple thousand kilowatt hours a year to spare. You can get an electric vehicle. You can get heat pumps. Start to electrify your home based on the usage that you have there. Or on the flip side of the coin, if you would rather play it a bit safer, you can undersize the system and know that even if you do have a small utility bill on top of that, you are getting full value out of all of the energy you are generating. How do I choose between installers? How does EnergySage vet them? So as I said, we do have a thorough vetting and onboarding process with every installer that we bring on. We have a full team of both business development partners as well as installer representatives who do our installer recruiting, who do our onboarding training, and consistently work with every installer on the site to make sure that their business is still going well, that they're operating as we expect, that the service is good. We monitor customer reviews and feedback very seriously. Some of the things that we look for when we bring installers on, and we don't work with everyone, how long have they been in business? What does their pricing model look like? We do want them to be competitive and succeed. An installer who's coming in consistently more expensive than the rest is simply not going to do very well on the site. We look and make sure that their licenses and insurances are completely up to date, that they have a good level of quality communication prior to being onboarded with us. Again, we believe that the installers we work with represent us, and we take that very seriously. So I'd say, obviously, you will want to do your own due diligence on who you're working with, but you can rest assured as a baseline, we do that as well. And we are there as a third-party resource for you to be able to help you vet them and be able to help with any of that communication and work with the installers should you need any additional assistance down the road. How does the tax credit work? So for those who aren't aware, I would imagine most people have at least heard of it to a certain degree. Really, the big value driver for solar from a financial perspective, outside of just covering your own utility usage and utility bills in general, is the federal tax credit, the 26% federal investment tax credit based on the total cost of installation. Quick breakdown on how it works. It is a tax credit. It is not a refund, meaning that if you are claiming the tax credit, it is essentially a reduction in your tax liability. So come the first tax season following your installation, let's say you had a tax credit value of $5,000 and you were going to owe $15,000 in taxes that year. That would be applied to what you'd owe and reduce that down to from 15 to 10,000. It does roll over for up to 20 years. So let's say you're in a position where you are short on tax liability and you can only claim a portion of the credit that first year, you can roll over the remaining value of the credit to the next tax season, and then it does look back as well. So if you had an excess of tax liability your previous year, but you weren't going to have any that first year of eligibility, that is a case where you could actually receive a check in the mail for it by applying it to the previous year's tax season. The unfortunate flip side of the tax credit, though, is that it does require that you have some tax liability to claim. So people who do not pay any federal income tax over the course of a given year might have some difficulty claiming it unless you're able to create tax liability for yourself, such as drawing from a retirement account or other details there. Now, but again, that is 26%. It is available regardless of whether you purchase or finance the system. So for purchasing, you would obviously be applying that as a 26% on the total purchase cost. If you are financing the system, taking out a loan, you would be applying it to the total principal of the loan. Next up, do I need a battery? Batteries have also become consistently more common over the last 2 years, I'd say. And this one, I'll try to make this pretty quick. We could probably talk about batteries on their own for the rest of this presentation. But really, I'd say a battery can make sense for a lot of people, especially if you are looking for ways to be a little bit more resilient in your home, some protection against grid blackouts. If you want to be more self-sufficient and export as little energy back to the grid as possible, a battery can be a great fit for that. I would emphasize it is absolutely not a necessity. So long as you maintain a connection to the grid at any given point, the battery is really not going to be adding any direct benefit to the system. So if you are mostly just looking to be a bit greener to offset more of your utility consumption, then I'd say you don't need to go forward with the battery. You can hold off on it and possibly wait till a later date. But if you are interested in one, they are definitely an option. And there are actually some good incentives for batteries in the New England area, depending on your state as well, that you can claim and take advantage of. But they are, I would say, somewhat pricey. I'd say batteries specifically have been affected by stuff like supply chain issues, manufacturing restrictions. So if the battery is something you're interested in, but the price tag is holding you off, again, I'd say you can just get the solar portion at this time, get the infrastructure in place, and then maybe consider the battery once the tech improves a bit, or once the prices come down a bit more. So definitely a good option for a lot of people, but not a necessity by any means. You can go to the next slide, Niti.
And I also just want to step in and say we see a lot of questions coming in. So I'm actually just going to pause and give you a couple, Matt, because they really relate to this
Perfect.
slide. Somebody said, which is a really good question on the fundamentals of solar, I think. So somebody said, why does consumption matter when you're planning your installation? And I think that sort of feeds into like how a system works with the utility and things like that.
Yeah, this is a great question. So specifically, what you're generally going to ideally be sizing your system for is to offset as much of your own personal usage as possible, either by directly through covering the energy that's being used in your home, or indirectly, and this is where I can go into a bit of an explanation on how your system interacts with your utility, by indirectly covering it through utility grid credits. So during the day, when you install a system, if you're producing more energy than you use, you are going to be exporting that extra energy back to your utility grid and receiving what you can think of as store credit for your excess energy produced. What that's called is net metering. It's part of the onboarding process with your utility, is getting a meter that can run backwards installed in your home, and they track the amount of energy you're sending back to them. So if you're looking to size your system for the amount of energy that you use, you're going to be taking into account all of the energy you might consume over a given year and size a system that is going to cover as much of that as possible, either again directly or indirectly through that system sizing. You certainly don't need to size perfectly one-to-one for what you use. Again, there's nothing wrong with undersizing a system, and if you'd rather just oversize and go with as big a system as they'll allow you to install, just because you want to produce a lot of energy, you want to help support your community, you can do that as well. Some utilities will give you some pushback on oversizing. Typically, I'd say the rule of thumb, depending on your region, is around 115 or 120% of what you use. They might not let you approve a system beyond that. But again, if you want to shoot for the stars and go with a bigger system, that's perfectly fine as well.
And then just to return to the roof, there were some questions that came up about what kinds of roofs are really just really rejected out of hand. And somebody specifically asked about slate. And then there was another question about other technology beyond panels, like tiles or thin films.
Yeah, great question. So there are, I'd say, a variety of roof types that can be supported with solar. Slate, unfortunately, is one that I think pretty commonly is going to be rejected by most installers. There are system types and installation types that might be able to fit with a slate roof, specifically in something that's pretty common for, obviously not quite so common in New England as it is in stuff like the area Southern California, but stuff like a common one we see is like Spanish tile roofs, where what you'll actually do is remove the subsection of roof the panels are living on and put down a section of more traditional shingles underneath and install the solar on there. That's difficult for slate roofs compared to a lot of other types, though. I would say that if your roof is slate, it might be a difficult prospect unless you're willing to completely re-roof a section of it with a more traditional material. But other types that are feasible, obviously most traditional shingles are not going to have any issues. Metal roofs, specifically standing seam metal roofs, are also very common and are absolutely doable. Again, stuff like Spanish tile roofs are a bit trickier, but there are some racking systems that work with it. It might just change the possible warranty your installer would offer since they are a bit more fragile. The other racking system you'll sometimes see with roofs like that is more of a fish hook type system where you install these hooks underneath that you then rack the panels on top of. Alternate question there was the solar shingles. Solar shingles are an alternate option to traditional panels if you are looking to do a full re-roof as well as go solar. I would say that they are still pretty sparse at this point. There are some companies who do them, Tesla mainly being the big one, as well as some others, but they are not as easy to get as traditional panels. There aren't too many companies doing them. Oftentimes installation dates for them can be pushed out sometimes up to a year or more, depending on scheduling conflicts. And price-wise, obviously price will matter more to some customers than others. I would say they aren't necessarily the most economically feasible option, even with bundling the fact that you're getting a re-roof done as part of it. But if you like the technology, and I do think it's really interesting technology, it definitely can be an alternate to look into. Obviously, the aesthetics are sometimes preferable to a traditional panel look, and some people will care about that more than others. So if you're interested, it definitely can be worth looking into. We unfortunately do not currently have any installers on our platform who work with solar shingles, but again, some alternate options. Tesla, again, going to be the big one in terms of the national availability. I don't know too many individual names around here besides them who offer them, but again, quick local search might help you out there.
Thanks, Matt. So there are other questions about incentives, which are your next slide. So I'm going to let you go ahead and move on.
Perfect. Yep. So we have a couple slides here just with some more specific details of what the incentives are that are available in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We can do a quick breakdown here if you have more specific questions about them. Again, happy to take those offline after the presentation today. So Massachusetts, quick overview. You obviously, as a baseline, have the federal tax credit. You'll have net metering with pretty much any individual region in the state that you live in. There's a $1,000 state tax credit. It's worth 15% of the total cost of the system. Unless you're looking at an extremely small system, I'd say this will be $1,000 for you. So a $15,000 state tax credit, and then the SMART program, the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program, which essentially is what we would refer to as a production-based incentive. This is coupled with your net metering benefits, and essentially for the first 10 years after you get a system installed, you are going to receive a payment worth a certain amount worth a certain value for every kilowatt hour you are exporting to the grid. The SMART program specifically here, I believe actually the price we have here is a bit out of date. We have it listed at 29 to 31 cents per kilowatt hour. It's a block structured program, meaning that as more people install solar in Massachusetts, that rate comes down. So it is a worthwhile point to go sooner rather than later if you are interested, since it'll give you a better SMART rate. Right now, I believe it's at about 27 cents for Eversource and 25 cents for National Grid. But essentially, this is coupled with your net metering. So with the SMART program, everything that you're exporting is going to be covering all of the energy you're pulling from the grid, and then everything from that value in excess of your net metering benefits is going to be paid out to you on a monthly basis as an actual cash rebate. So if in a given month, let's say you were getting 20 cents per kilowatt hour as far as net metering goes, everything in excess of that, let's say it's about a 7-cent gap, you're going to receive 7 cents per kilowatt hour as a check from the state of Massachusetts on a given month. Again, production-based incentive essentially meaning that you're getting paid based on the amount of energy you're producing rather than a flat rate like the federal tax credit. And I believe to accompany with that, I think I saw another question asking how net metering works. So yeah, to speak on net metering again, during any period of the day where you are producing more energy than you would otherwise use, you are going to send that extra energy you're producing back to your utility grid, and your utility is essentially going to give you bill credits for the amount of excess energy that you're producing. You can think of it a bit like rollover minutes on a phone plan.
Ready to go to Rhode Island?
Great, and last quick question there, applicable to municipal light sources like West Boylston. So the SMART program is available in some individual municipal areas, but not all of them. There are notably some across the state that do not participate in SMART. I unfortunately don't have a full database on hand of which ones are applicable. I'd say if you do live in one of the areas in Massachusetts that's part of a municipal utility, it's worth checking with them directly to see whether they participate in SMART or whether they have their own individual local incentive program that replaces it, which some do as well. All right, and moving on to Rhode Island here. So Rhode Island, a bit more complicated. So Rhode Island, again, you'll also have the federal tax credit, you'll have net metering. There is a small scale solar grant program as well, which is essentially a rebate program that gives you a certain value per watt installed via your installer. So again, we have some numbers here. It's up to $7,500. If you got a 5 kilowatt system, you'd receive about $4,500 in a cash rebate upon signing the contract and moving forward. The solar grant program specifically, I would say, it's not quite a lottery-based program, but the funds are typically considerably less than the amount of people who generally go solar in Rhode Island in a given year. So usually it is worth trying to go solar sooner rather than later on a yearly basis so that you can try to give yourself the best shot of getting in on the program. If you are not eligible for the solar grant program, worry not, there is still another great incentive in Rhode Island, which is called the Renewable Energy Growth Program. So it's similar to the SMART program in Massachusetts, but it is a bit different to explain. It's what we would call a feed-in tariff program, where instead of having traditional net metering, you would essentially opt out of net metering, meaning you would not receive bill credits for everything that you're getting through your utility, and essentially get an actual cash payment for all of the energy that you're exporting to the grid. So you would be getting, more specifically here, about 28.45 cents per kilowatt hour that you're strictly selling back to the grid for a 15-year rate. To put that in perspective, if your cost for energy in Rhode Island was about 20 cents, that means that instead of just getting 20 cents per kilowatt hour through net metering, you're actually getting an extra 8 cents. So you're getting paid out more for the energy you're exporting than what you're paying for what you're drawing from the grid. The only, I would say, if there is one, the only downside to the Renewable Energy Growth Program is that this rate is fixed for a 15-year period. So let's say your cost for energy in Rhode Island is 20 cents per kilowatt hour today, but a decade from now, what if it jumps up to 30 or 35 cents? Then you would be paying a bit more to your utility than what you'd get back from the Renewable Energy Growth Program. I'd say it's unlikely utility rates are going to spike that high, but obviously utilities are a bit difficult to predict at times. Overall, though, I'd say the Renewable Energy Growth Program is one of the handful of programs around the country that is strictly just going to be giving you an actual sell back rate for energy, where you're selling back to the grid and receiving an actual cash payment worth more energy than, or worth more in energy than what you're actually paying for everything that you draw. So we do list, and I think we have this on the Massachusetts page as well, what we call a payback period. For Rhode Island, it's 7.14. For Massachusetts, I believe it was about 6.8. So the payback period, this is a value, and I want to touch on this quickly, that we also display on our site. What it ideally is supposed to represent is the amount of time it will take for you to essentially recoup your system's cost by going solar, strictly for a purchase option. So with Rhode Island, with an average system in Rhode Island based on data from our site, if you were to go solar today, it would take you just over 7 years to essentially have the system pay for itself. And at that point, everything past that 7.14 point is strictly savings. So some states are obviously going to vary more than others. Massachusetts and Rhode Island notably are pretty good just because utility rates are a bit higher. And you actually still have incentives available. Again, incentives do typically tend to go away quicker than they come in. So the earlier you get in on incentive programs, typically the rates are going to be better. I think I might have just seen a question related to that. Should we wait for better state and federal credits? Do you think the Biden administration and Massachusetts advantages are about as high as they will likely be? This is a great question. And it's a difficult one to specifically answer for sure, just because there is some element of sort of a question mark around a lot of this. I would say that for the Biden administration specifically, I do anticipate at some point we will see a revamp of the federal incentive program. What I think that will likely be is either an extension of the current federal tax credit, which again is 26% for a longer period of time. Currently, it is slated to reduce to 22% in 2023, and is currently slated to be eliminated after 2023. So assuming we see no changes, this is the best tax credit you'll see. If we do see a change, I would say it'll either be an extension at the current rate or an increase back up to 30%, which is what it was previously, which obviously that is a plus. An additional 4%, I would say it's obviously not enormous. I don't think we will see a bigger increase than a jump up to 30%, though it is certainly possible. 30% was the most recent projected change that was proposed as part of the Build Back Better plan. And then for the state level incentives, State levels, I'd say, again, I think this is about as good as we're going to see. A lot of the Massachusetts and Rhode Island programs specifically are structured to help them support their renewable goals, meaning that as more and more solar gets installed, those rates are built to decrease. So if you are interested in moving forward based on those state incentives, expect them to go down more likely than they are to go up.
And laws like that are the kinds of things that Green Energy Consumers works on over time, but we work on it as needed. So if over time it looks like, you know, solar incentives are so low that it's stalling the market, which that's not what we want to see. That's the kind of thing that we'd advocate for. Solar is just one small piece of the mix in terms of getting us to our climate goals. So it really depends on what it looks like over the next several years, what it really looks like we'll need to get to those goals. And we'll keep an eye on it.
Perfect. And E.T., did you see any specific questions in the chat thus far that you specifically wanted to flag that we can loop around to?
I've got a whole list. And I think one of the ones that we could ask now, and then we can get into a discussion. I just want to recap that for everyone. There have been some repeated questions about if you live in a condo or if you're sharing your home. We'll definitely talk about that. Disposal of panels after their lifetime, resale value, and we're going to get to all of those and possibly more. But first, I thought it might be good for you to touch on the question we got about leasing versus owning, because mostly we've been talking about owning today, and leasing is an option. So if you want to just touch on how leasing works.
Yeah, absolutely. So leasing as an alternate to loan, as an alternate to ownership, is a system where rather than you owning the equipment directly, you are essentially renting out the equipment through the installer that you're working with. Which typically the benefit of leasing is that your immediate monthly payment is going to be lower than what it might otherwise be if you were to, let's say, finance the system, take out a loan. The downside to leasing and the other option would be a power purchase agreement where you're paying for the amount of energy you're getting, more like from your utility rather than paying a flat rate for the system. The downside is that because you don't own the system, you do not get to claim any of the incentives like the SMART program or the tax credit. And it does not have the same payoff period where, you know, if you finance the system, you might have a 10-year loan package. If you're leasing, you're going to have essentially an indefinite payment going to the company who's offering the lease. Leases, I would say, they definitely can be a good option for people who are on a very strict monthly budget. So if you have a limit you're not able to go over, leases can be a good alternate. And for people who are not able to claim stuff like the federal tax credit, so if you don't have enough tax liability to claim the credit, then the incentives might not matter as much to you, and a lease, again, might just be a slightly more cost-effective option. I would say that ownership, I think, is more preferable for most. Again, most people will be able to claim a lot of those incentives, and home ownership does make resale of the home easier with an existing lease. So if you are, and I think one of the questions was home value. So the national average for increased home value with solar, based on data from Zillow, is about 4%. And that is because you own the system, you are going to actually get that back as part of your recouped value upon selling the home with an ownership. Whereas with a lease, you would either have to buy out the rest of the lease from your leasing company, which typically would mean you would have ended up paying more going for the lease plus purchase rather than just the purchase, or you would have to go through a lease transfer, which again is possible, but it would be part of the logistics of selling the home, finding a homeowner willing to take on an existing lease. So I would say for people who are looking to leave their home sooner rather than later, but you do really want to go solar, I would really recommend purchasing at that point. But again, for a couple of reasons, leases are a good alternative.
And they're a little easier too. My aunt does have solar panels on her home via a lease, and they put them there. She doesn't maintain them. She doesn't think about them. She just feels good about them, and she has kind of a set rate on her electric bill because of them and saves money. So she's pretty happy with that arrangement. That's what she wants, and she feels good about it. So it's definitely an option out there.
Absolutely.
And just kind of wrapping up here with, before we get to more questions, because there are lots of wonderful questions, a reminder that anything specifically you want to talk about your home, your situation, that's what Matt does. That's what his team does. So again, we will make sure you are connected to Matt at the end of this via email, and he'll even give you a calendar that you could just schedule a time to chat with them. But if you haven't signed up for EnergySage yet, we would love it if you would go sign up through our portal. Full transparency, we're a nonprofit, and if you heard about EnergySage through us and you go sign up there and you go forward with installing solar with a installer you found there, we get a kickback, and that really helps us out with our mission. Not a huge kickback, but it's really wonderful for us. So if we're the reason you're going to sign up for EnergySage, please go through our page. And like Matt said, it just takes a second. So that's greenenergyconsumers.org/solar. And if you like this webinar, before we get to your questions, because I want to take this down, I just want to mention we have other webinars coming up. We always have a lot. We have a webinar all about how to make the new Act on Climate policy in Rhode Island move forward, what we should do to make laws that will actually reduce Rhode Island's emissions. We have our EV chat on March 10th, which is about cool cars, cars we don't usually talk about. Typically, we talk a lot about the Bolt and the Leaf because they're wonderful and very commonly bought. But we're going to talk about like the Ford Mach-E and the Kia and Soul and other EVs. So come chat and just listen to EV owners or chat about your own car. Green municipal aggregation, which is basically green electricity for whole communities. We're going to be talking about on March 15th or 16th. And then we also have an excellent webinar that we just did in February, and we're repeating at the end of March. About new heat pump incentives in Massachusetts and what also is available in Rhode Island. That also gives a basic overview of heat pumps and what to look for. So we put all of these up on our YouTube channel, and they're all free. You can RSVP at greenenergyconsumers.org/event for these and more. You can see our contact information right here, but I will follow up with an email to absolutely make sure you get it, because I want to jump off now and hit a few more questions. So I'm going to stop.
Great, and I can jump into the last couple of questions there. I think there were a couple of good ones that just
Go
came
for
in.
it.
Question here: what is the length of time a system is guaranteed? After that time, what is the typical rate to have an extended service contract? So on the manufacturing side, generally especially for good quality equipment these days, you are going to see warranties for 25 years on both the output of the panels and on the material quality. So covering anything from defects all the way up through actual degradation of the equipment, you can expect it to be warranted for 25 years. The labor side on the installers you're working with can be a bit more variable, though I would say that you can generally expect labor warranties to be more related to the actual quality of work done by the installer, which is going to be more relevant early on in the system's lifespan. Is there a cost for EnergySage's services? There is not a completely free to use site. We do, for full transparency, get paid by the installers who use the platform. So installers who work with us pay what you can think of as like a marketplace fee or a subscription fee to use the service and provide quotes, but no additional cost to the homeowners. Other questions here. ET, did you see any specifically you wanted to make sure we pull an answer today?
I see the hand raised, Michael, so I wanted to just let him go for it. You are muted though. Can we?
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
I can hear you fine now.
Okay. Well, yeah, we have an oil system, and we live in a contemporary ranch house. I use a power wheelchair, and we want to get rid of oil, go to whole house electric, or ground water electric, and we want to have solar on the roof, and we want some kind of generator or battery backup because I use a sleep apnea machine and other medical equipment, so I want to make sure I have power. So I'm looking at spending a fortune, and I just want to compare because I'm guessing there could be a big swing in pricing. So is that something your company could help me do?
Yeah, fantastic question. Unfortunately, on the server side, we currently only work on the solar and battery backup portion, which we absolutely can help with the comparison for. Again, if you work through our platform, you'll receive a number of bids that are going to give you a very objective display of what the costs are going to look like, both for the solar and battery portion of the project. I'd say for doing the first part of electrifying your home first, and we do have some resources and some content materials for that. Not anything where you can specifically source that directly through our platform yet. But a lot of solar installers will have partnered contractors they work with to be able to offer kind of the other side of the spectrum there in terms of the range of home energy efficiency services, going full electric heating. So I'm happy to follow up on that once we get off the call today and see if I can get you some additional resources. Sometimes depending on the region you live in as well, your local utility company will have a pretty good set of resources regarding local companies you can work with to electrify your home first and get a lot of that project underway.
Okay, thank you. Early on, I left my name and contact info in the chat.
And I'll make sure that we all connect too, because we do work on heat pumps. So absolutely.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yes. We'll help you figure it out. We have good people here.
Do you think battery connected to solar is adequate to keep a good amount of the house operating for a couple of days, or do you think you need to go to a propane generator to be safe?
Yeah, it's another very good question. I would say it somewhat depends on the scope of what you're looking to cover. If you're just looking to keep a couple appliances going, like a sleep apnea machine, for example, I'd say a battery specifically dedicated to that should be more than sufficient. If you're looking to cover a pretty good majority of what the home uses, solar batteries, I would say, are really not quite there yet, unless you're willing to get a couple batteries, which it can really start to rack up in terms of price. So I would say a good way to go about it could be maybe getting one solar battery and pairing it with a home generator, so you could have the battery dedicated specifically to a small portion, what we would call your critical load, and then have the generator for any supplemental energy you need. But especially for a multi-day outage for a larger coverage, I'd say the generator is typically going to be the more effective solution currently. I do think that battery tech's going to improve, so it is a case where you could maybe supplement one with the other. But if especially for like a medical baseline, I'd say if you're looking for multi-day coverage and it's a pretty heavy usage of energy, a battery might be tough, at least for a singular battery.
Matt, I wanna be conscious that it's actually now past 11, but I wonder, are you able to stay for a few more minutes
Yeah, I can. So I think I can stay for about another 5 minutes, and again, I'm happy to just provide my contact info as well as a link to be able to set up meetings with other members of my team for anyone who's looking to dig into their personal options a bit more in depth after this. Sorry, I know we probably went through a lot of these questions pretty quickly. I know we had a good amount to cover today, so hopefully we can
make sure that every single one of you gets an answer to questions you put in the chat. We're going to make sure that every single one of you gets the ability to follow up and speak with Matt's team and with us, and hopefully set you up for success here. But since Matt can stay an extra couple minutes, I wanted to just put the condo question to you, Matt, and then if anyone else wants to ask any questions, if you can stay another 5 minutes, please do. If you have to go, we are recording this, and like I said, we're going to write down responses to every single question. So go on condos.
Great. Yeah. So condos are a bit tricky. The difficulty is that when you install solar, you do have to have the system linked to one direct meter. And oftentimes with condos, you're going to have an individual meter for each unit within the property. What you can sometimes do, especially if your condo or building has a common meter, is at least install solar for the common meter. And then there are programs in Massachusetts, depending on your utility region, called what we would call virtual net metering, where you can essentially be generating excess energy on one meter and then share those net metering credits with an additional meter. The scope of that is typically somewhat limited, so it can be viable for like a duplex or triplex if you have 3 meters on one property. For something larger than that, I'd say it is difficult unless you're willing to just put solar in for a common meter, or if you're just looking to go solar for your individual unit within a condo, so long as you can get approval from your HOA, who's essentially for the shared roof aspect of it.
And there was a question specifically about that. If your HOA is not cooperative, is that just like a you problem, or are there resources to help you?
Yeah, so the HOAs can definitely be difficult. There are a lot of states will have laws against HOAs specifically blocking solar. I believe Massachusetts is one of them. I'm not sure about Rhode Island. Unfortunately, what they can do is have pretty specific restrictions on kind of hoops you have to jump through to go solar. A lot of installers have experience working with HOAs, though. It's something they are typically prepared for. They understand what type of application materials HOAs generally need. And so if you are looking to do that, I would say that it's worth maybe connecting with an installer directly and asking them what the process is for them typically going about that application process. But again, difficulty can honestly just vary based on your HOA. Some are easier about it than others.
Thanks, sir. Again, just want to remind everyone we're going to answer every single question and connect with every single one of you individually. But if anyone has a burning desire to ask the last question, I'll let you. Otherwise, I'm going to close it out.
Great. I hope this has been helpful to everyone today. Again, happy to follow up with anything. In addition to that, looks like please answer the Donna Cooper question just came in the chat. I have had panels since 2009. I need to replace my roof now. I'd like to know if it's better to take the panels off and put them back on. Should I consider updating the panels? Great question. So certainly if you are replacing the roof, you will need to have a contractor come in to remove and reinstall the equipment. The price range for that can vary. I would say commonly I've seen quotes for that of maybe around $5,000, which obviously is not an insignificant amount considering that you are looking at getting essentially the same level of equipment. If we're comparing equipment now versus 2009, Donna, especially if you are not currently covering 100% of your energy needs with your existing system, I'd say a new system is much more likely to be able to get you to 100% with how panel technology has evolved. So if you're interested in looking into that, I'd say it could be worth getting quotes for a new system as well as getting quotes for just removing and reinstalling the equipment and seeing what the cost difference is. And if it's a difference of maybe, a couple $1,000s, you might get better value out of just switching out the existing system. But both are options.
And with that, I want to say thank you everyone for coming. These are always a challenge because there's so many individualized questions, but our main goal is to make sure that you understand that there are people at EnergySage whose job is to help you figure this out for free. And we really trust them as a consumer-focused organization. So again, I'm going to answer all your questions offline that came in chat, and we're going to connect you with Matt's team and any other people here at Green Energy Consumers that can help with your energy needs. So thanks for taking a chunk of your Friday out to hang out with us, and also for coming to a changed time and location. We really appreciate your flexibility. We will send out follow-up as soon as we can, hopefully by Monday, and also this recording. Thank you all so much. And thanks, Matt.
Happy Friday, everyone.